morning, grinders. Welcome to RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD, BlenderHD. If you want to follow me on Twitter, and it's Friday, October 27th. We'll be taking a GPP look at the Week 8 NFL slate coming up this week on DraftKings, as well as FanDuel. Hit that thummy thumb button. You know I like the thummy thumbs in the morning. If you're in the chat, I know it's not Fighting Friday. We don't got MMA tomorrow, but we do have NFL. So we got you're only going to be able to win $1 million. I'm going to keep on going back to this because it needs to be highlighted that you are a million maker winner, but you only have one opportunity this weekend. You can't make it up in UFC either.
Yeah. Well, you usually can't win $1 million in UFC. They only did that once. But yeah, I got my green button earlier this year. It was a big professional deal and $1 million. So yeah, looking forward to NFL pretty much every weekend since then and before then, really.
Feel free to post your questions in the YouTube chat. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to always know when we go live. So this NFL Week 8 slate, we see all the content here we have on RotoGrinders. We have a bunch of free stuff. We have Lineup HQ. We got the projections. We got Sim Labs coming up next week. That's going to be released soon. I've been playing around with that. We got all the premium shows. We got the picks articles and everything. Tons of stuff will be coming out today as well. The top stacks tool, the props and pick'em stuff as well. You should be hitting those props today, yesterday, today. Get them, get the best price, get the best number. You could use our projections. You could use our prop tool. You could use our pick'em tool. You could also just download our statistical projections and use them any way you want. Feel free to put them in Excel. Feel free to aggregate with them with other stuff. Put them into other dashboards. You get all that and more here with a RotoGrinders premium subscription. Click on that link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. So we take a look at this Week 8 slate on DraftKings. And do we just have to get used to it, John, that like a 47.5 total, a 48 total is just like, wow, this got to be the game of the week, when in the past, like that would still be like the 5th or 6th highest team total. Are we going back to the well? I know that this is the recurring theme with you on Fridays. The Dolphins have a 28 implied team total. Just play the Dolphins and let everyone else make mistakes.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I do think the slate starts there, and I said it a few weeks ago that I think like the first thing you think about every week should be like, where are the Dolphins? Like, where are they? Who are they playing? What's the game environment? And they again have the highest implied point total of the week, and I think they're going to go under-owned. They're getting more and more expensive. And there's like some injury workload questions this week because I think Mostert and Tyreek Hill are both I think questionable, but I think they both practiced Thursday, which is generally a good sign. But I think limited practice. But I'm tentatively expecting both of them to play. But then there's a question of well, Jeff Wilson's really back this week, what we think. So how much does that cut into Raheem Mostert's workload? But maybe again, maybe it's a situation where you want to be over the field on everybody. And because it is very unlikely that they completely disappoint. And matchup with New England isn't the best in the world. I think I had said earlier this year, I would probably want to be over the field on the Dolphins, except for I know they have games coming up against the Patriots and the Jets. But Patriots maybe aren't as bad of a matchup as I would have thought a few weeks ago, or maybe at the beginning of the year. And the game's in Miami, so yeah, I'll probably try to be over the field on the Dolphins, and I'm going to end up over the field on Kendrick Bourne. I think trying to run it back, but that's okay. I know it's going to be the case, but I'm okay with it.
Okay, so it's not necessarily even just a Dolphins onslaught, and who cares about the Patriots? You think the Patriots could actually fight back in this game? I mean, we saw it against the Bills that finally their offense actually had pieces in DFS that you may have actually wanted. You think, what are you looking at? You're looking more at Bourne than someone like Ramondre Stevenson.
I think so. I don't know how things are going to be divided up between Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott. I like, to be clear, if the Patriots were playing somebody else, I wouldn't be that interested in them. So I'll have like in my 150 entry set, I'll have some like Dolphin onslaughts, like Dolphins, like Raheem Mostert, Tyreek Hill to a stack that doesn't have Patriots run backs. I guess if I am going to run it back from somebody on the Patriots, probably interested in Kendrick Bourne the most. Maybe I gotta look into Demario Douglas. Like he's a possibility. He's gonna be like a dirt cheap guy that could potentially be getting more work. But primarily interested in the Dolphins.
Another team with a high implied team total that did very well last week. Of course, they could have done better if it wasn't for the fact that they were up by 5 touchdowns, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. They're facing the Cardinals in Arizona, so we don't have to really worry about weather there. You got Lamar, you got Zay Flowers, you got Mark Andrews, you got like Trey McBride, Marquise Brown on the other side. I mean, I think this is going to be the last game. Is this going to be the last game that Joshua Dobbs plays? I mean, I don't think Kyler isn't back this week, but he's close to coming back. I mean, we have Dobbs in the projections.
Yeah.
But does that matter? Are you more interested in just, well, let's just play all the like similar to the Dolphins? Like this Cardinals team looked halfway decent the first 2 or 3 games, and now they're awful. Short fields, bad defense. Like this is the type of game where the Ravens could do what they did to the Lions last week and score 35 points by halftime. Do we overthink this and just like, well, screw the Cardinals. Let me just play Lamar +2, and he could now the way that they pass, he could support 2 pass catchers in a stack, unlike in previous seasons. I mean, they're cheaper. This stack is cheaper than because you have to play Tyreek Hill and Tua in the Dolphin stack. I just think maybe Baltimore actually comes in higher owned than Miami.
Yeah, I think Baltimore will be higher owned than Miami. I think, because they're cheaper, and I actually am more interested in the Arizona pieces. Like I think there's more Arizona pieces you can run it back with than like New England pieces. I'm more interested in Dolphins onslaught stacks. Whereas with Baltimore, I actually think there's some really well priced Arizona guys like Trey McBride. I mean, he fits the tight end position. He's like 2,800 on DraftKings. Like that's really cheap. And yeah, I mean, like if Baltimore is out to a big lead, presumably Arizona's passing it some more. I don't think it's definite that Kyler Murray's not playing. I think he's off the injury report and practicing. I would still expect like Joshua Dobbs to be starting, and I think we'll have confirmation well before game time. Like we'll probably know by later today. But it could go either way. I don't know that it makes like that huge of a difference. I don't even know what Murray's price is on DraftKings. But presumably more interested in like the Lamar side. Like Zay Flowers is going to be really highly owned.
He's 5,800, John.
Yeah. I think he's like really well priced on FanDuel too. Like he's one of the guys that's like too cheap on both sites. And so like Zay Flowers will be highly owned. It'll be like one of those situations where Zay Flowers might be my highest owned wide receiver, but I might be under the field. But that'll be okay. So I like both sides of this game, and I like the Arizona side a little bit more. The running back, DeMarcado, seems to be evolving into like the primary running back there. And if that's the case, he's too cheap as well. And then Marquise Brown, I think there's like an injury question, but I think he'll probably play, and he's probably too cheap. So there's actually some appealing pieces from the Arizona side.
Okay, let's go down the team total list. We got Kansas City at Denver, the Chiefs at the Broncos. This may be another slate where Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce aren't going to be as owned as, I mean, I played a bunch last week. I mean, always the problem with Mahomes is that outside of Kelce, you really don't know where the ball is going to go to. But, I mean, Rashee Rice is kind of separating a bit, but now he's up to 5K. Kelce's at 8,400. Mahomes is over 8K. Pacheco's probably going to be the most popular player in this game. Are you more inclined to play the Chiefs at lower ownership to the Ravens compared to Miami? I mean, I'm kind of looking at this going, I'm not sure how people are going to fit these guys in. But I'm also not sure if I'd play a Mahomes, Rice, Kelsey team, what the rest of my lineup is even going to look like, if that's
Yeah.
going to even be good enough.
Yeah, it's the same repeating problem that like Mahomes is 9,000. He's primarily passing to Kelsey, who's like way over, like way priced way higher than all the other tight ends, and deservedly so. But I'd maybe rather just play Kelsey than play like Mahomes Kelsey stack. I don't know that like Denver is necessarily a team I want to run it back with. And like Denver's giving up way more rushing yards per game than any other team in the NFL. Like they're at what 167. I think the next closest is Carolina at like 144. And some of that is from like the Miami 70-point game earlier this year. But like you could end up playing Mahomes and Kelsey, and then you're really struggling to fill out the rest of your lineup. And then Isaiah Pacheco could just get 2 rushing touchdowns, and you're kind of toast. And if Denver
Play them
can't
together.
stop,
Why can't they play all three? Can I do Mahomes, Pacheco, Kelsey?
you could. I just don't know that Kansas City's like really romping over teams like we've seen in years past. Like that Mahomes slide down, right, where we slid instead of going into the end zone, like might be the play of the year for the gambling like fantasy DFS, year. Like that might define the 2023 2024 NFL season. Um, where the Chiefs just aren't like piling it on like we've seen in years past. So they're putting up some good scores. I mean, they're clearly a capable offense, but they're just not like they're so expensive. They have to go berserk to pay off those prices. Like so, like a Mahomes, Pacheco, Kelsey stack is just really expensive, and I don't think you're going to see like Pacheco get 2 touchdowns and Kelsey get like 15 receptions and a touchdown. It's possible, but so like in my 150 set, that'll probably be represented, but it's not going to be as highly represented as the Dolphins in Baltimore.
Another team with a high-priced quarterback that we typically like playing, similar to Lamar. They have a 25.25 implied team total on the road to Washington, which isn't that much of a road trip for them. Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown. Do we just? Why don't? I mean, we've seen that AJ Brown's target share has just gotten larger and larger and larger in comparison to the other Eagles options. Do you think that continues? I mean, I think DeAndre Swift is going to be owned. I don't think AJ Brown is going to be as owned as maybe he should be. I mean, he's not going to be low owned. He'll probably be 10 to 12% owned or something. But you get into the problem again, like very similar to those like Mahomes stacks, is that Hurts, Brown, Goddard. Oh my God, I don't have salary for the rest of my lineup. Like that. This is the main reason why, like the Lamar stack, even though Lamar is the same price as these guys, like Flowers is 5,600 and Andrews is 6,400. That allows you a lot more in the rest of your lineup than when you're spending 8K on one spot and 5K on another spot to piece them together. But I think this is maybe another slate where Jalen Hurts goes under-owned also, and you just play him with AJ Brown and just wait for the 7 for 145 and 2 touchdown game to come, and Hurts with 2 push touchdowns. And what else do you need?
Yeah, actually, the tush push is what pushes this game, I think, over the Chiefs for me. You're right. I still think like Baltimore is better priced, but I think Philadelphia will go under owned, and I prefer I prefer the Eagles. I think to the Chiefs just because of the possibility of Hurts getting those like rushing touchdowns. Whereas I think Pacheco would get them in the Kansas City scenario. So yeah, if Hurts really does seem to be locking in on AJ Brown, and teams don't seem to be able to stop that. And like Washington is not going to be the team that steps up and stops AJ Brown. Like they've had issues in the secondary kind of throughout the season. I think they've given up the 6th most passing yards per game in the NFL. So great. I think Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown will be under-owned, I think, as a stack. Because people are still kind of looking at some last year stats. Like AJ Brown's not priced up high enough as he should be. So I think you're actually getting a discount on Hurts and AJ Brown compared to like Mahomes and Kelsey. And I'd probably rather go with the Hurts and AJ Brown because of the rushing touchdown possibilities with Hurts.
The next team with the highest implied team total is going to be, it's maybe a weird one. It also is going to feature a running back that's going to be fairly decently owned. I mean, we have his ownership is 13%, but I think he'll come in higher than that. That's Tony Pollard at 7,500. So Dallas is at home, 26 implied total against the Rams. I don't see. I mean, we have his ownership at 7%. I mean, he's 6,100. I mean, I look at this as like Dak Prescott is a cheap quarterback now. You could pair him with Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, like the Cowboys passing stack. Like even with Lamb, you get a cheap piece no matter what. I mean, if Pollard's going to be owned, and you play the Dak Lamb, Gallup, Ferguson, something like that, I'm not confident that Dallas passes the ball enough for, they run their offense that way. But they have a 26 implied team total, and that's commensurate with all these other teams that we mentioned. And I just don't think I just look at this and go, if I played this in the $100 spy, I mean, this could be a 4% Dak, a 2% Gallup, a 4% Lamb. I mean, like, these are real people. These aren't like, it's not like when you play Vomit Stack, bad team. Like, this is Vomit Stack, good team. It's just that, is Dak going to have to pass the ball more than 24 times? Is he going to have to make any more than 24 pass attempts? And if that's the case, then it's probably not going to work out. But the Rams do play at one of the highest paces in the NFL. And if they're playing at the highest pace and not being efficient, I mean, the play volume for Dallas could go way up.
Yeah, I think that Pollard is probably the beneficiary, and that's being reflected in the ownership, and it's probably not being reflected in this ownership as much as it will end up. And if you think he's well priced on DraftKings, like wait till you see Tony Pollard on FanDuel. I think he's the 10th most expensive running back, and he's going to be like the cash game running back on FanDuel. I'll probably still have a lot more Tony Pollard than I do like Dak Prescott stacks, but I think that's an interesting pivot. Going with Dak Prescott and like CeeDee Lamb, because like obviously CeeDee Lamb can go nuts, and it'll probably be less owned than it should. And you probably won't need to own that stack a ton to be over the field on it. So yeah, I think you can go there. I think I did right now. I've got it in the expert survey as the stack I'll be most under the field on. I think is Dak and CeeDee Lamb. But it's a good point. So we don't know how this game's going to play out. And it is, like Dak Prescott at home with a 26-point implied point total. Like people are going to assume it's Tony Pollard because he's underpriced. But the Cowboys don't know that he's underpriced on FanDuel, so they could end up giving the touchdowns to CeeDee Lamb, not knowing that he's a little bit more expensive. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's a good call. That's an interesting call, and I think you could definitely go there. Like that's a pivot I'd be comfortable with in single entry, in large field, both. I think you could go there.
Right. To me, I understand the reasons why they're lower projected from a player standpoint, and you prefer Pollard. But in comparison to ownership, I mean, it fits all these other teams. It's just like, oh, people are going to play the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Ravens. We go through and it's like, what's the ownership of Prescott, Lamb, Ferguson? And then because it's cheap enough, like I could still play decent. I could play Tyreek Hill as a one-off in that lineup and still be fine. I mean, like it's cheap enough that way. But of course, the expectation is going to be much lower. Do you have any games on the slate? We went over like pretty much the main total ones. Any games that aren't in that bucket? Because I mean, we have like no buys this week, so this is a big slate.
Yeah.
So what's a game that I have two like vomity type games that maybe we should be targeting? Do you have any? It doesn't have to fit the vomity bucket or anything like that, but what's a game that you're most likely to be targeting from a stack, either team stack or a game stack perspective?
I have some interest in the Houston Carolina game. It's going to be the CJ Stroud Bowl, and so there is a little bit of a narrative there. Like if you had just kept playing like CJ Stroud all year, I think you'd be doing pretty well on the season because he's been cheap, but he's been one of the better quarterbacks in the league, which people weren't expecting. And so this is his opportunity to go into Carolina and kind of show them what they missed out on. picking Bryce Young instead. So he's got 2 passing touchdowns in 4 of the last 5 games, 1 passing touchdown in the game where he didn't have 2. And he's still really cheap, probably more cheap than he should be. And is there a possibility and Carolina's got a terrible defense. And so is there a possibility that Houston lets CJ Stroud go a little bit more nuts than they would? Uh, because of the narrative, maybe, I don't know. And they would have the opportunity to do that against a bad Carolina defense. Carolina is maybe more susceptible to they're on the ground than through the air. And then you think maybe Damian Pierce, but like Singletary's been getting more carries. So more carries than you'd be expecting. So could be a split backfield, but maybe it's not. So this is a game I'll be sprinkling into, maybe larger field contests and maybe even like some qualifier type contests, like 10 entries out of 350 or whatever. Have like a CJ Stroud stack and maybe have a Damian Pierce stack as well. And it could go wrong, but it could go right too.
No, I have this. That's one of my 2. This is the vomit game of the week. It's a 43.5 total. It's not. This isn't like that low. I mean, Houston has a 23.5 implied team total. Panthers have a 20 implied team total. I mean, my preferred way to do this is you play Stroud plus one of the wide receivers, Dell or Collins, with Dalton Schultz to fill your tight end spot, and then you run it back with Adam Thielen, and there you go, 6,600 Adam Thielen. I mean, it may get to the point with how often he's targeted that Adam Thielen, in the beginning of the year, we're like, do you really play Adam Thielen for like, he was like, what, 3,600 or something like that? And then he ends up being like an $8,500 wide receiver at the end, just because it doesn't matter that they're a bad team when he gets targeted 17 times a week. I mean, it does, and they're always behind. So he's getting these 7-yard targets 17 times, especially on a site like DraftKings. I've been fading him in GPPs only because he's been high owned. And I'm like, this can't continue. And it's like, no, it can't continue. Yeah. It actually literally can continue.
Yeah, and this is one that has a little bit of a pricing difference between FanDuel and DraftKings because Thielen's actually priced up. I think he's the 5th most expensive wide receiver on FanDuel, but I think like maybe a 10th on DraftKings, and his game fits DraftKings better. So yeah, this is a game that I'll probably be stacking a little bit more on DraftKings just as a result of that. That I'll be getting more like Adam Thielen in my lineups on DraftKings. So yeah, I agree, and Thielen, like there's some like underlying metrics where he's like one of the best wide receivers in the league this year, and he was super cheap to start the season, and everybody just thought he was washed. But it could be one of those like perfect melds of player and system, and they want a veteran wide receiver to help out their younger quarterback, and he's like the safety valve, which is, I mean, it's all great for us if we're getting Adam Thielen at 6,600 on DraftKings. That is too cheap.
Michael Townsend in the chat. We will get to that. That's going to be something that I'm going to talk about. My other vomity type stack is a low total, so it's 40.5. But I like the pieces, and the pieces are going to be much lower owned this week than they've been the entire season, and that's Jacksonville at Pittsburgh. Trevor Lawrence, and you make your picks between Kirk, Ridley, Zay Jones, Evan Engram, because Zay Jones is going to be back, right? People don't like attacking, the Steelers defense. I mean, they're not bad, but they're not great. I think there are pieces to play. I mean, you could play the Pittsburgh side also. You could play Pickett, Pickens, Deontay Johnson. I mean, there's just a lot of mid-range. I like this game because there's so much mid-range that you could put 4 of them in your lineup, 3 or 4 of them in your lineup, and you still are able to get like all the other good one-offs like that you want in the rest of your lineup. I don't know what the ceiling of this game is. I mean, to me, this screams of a game that's probably not going to be 35-30 or anything like that. But at the prices, if you get condensed enough production, if like just Christian Kirk, they throw the ball a ton. And I think less people are playing this because, 1, the matchup, and 2, because now with Zay Jones back, like these guys from a median perspective project just slightly lower, right? People were thrilled. Dude, there were people the first week or two, Calvin Ridley was 6,700, and people were like, you got to get him while he's cheap. This guy's going to be an 8K wide receiver. He's 5,800. Like, there's no reason why we haven't projected as 1% owned. Like, dude, if you told me Calvin Ridley's 1% owned, like I'm gonna play him. Right? Christian Kirk is 4% owned. Like these guys just like, yeah, sure. I guess I would prefer Etienne if I had to choose, but I'm probably gonna play other running backs. What are your thoughts on this Jacksonville at Pittsburgh game? Because I could see you thinking that the ceiling is low. It's just the owner, like if the ownership is this way, I don't know how I don't take shots on this.
Yeah, it's probably a game I'm a little bit less interested in than it sounds like you are. Last time you did that to me, it ended up being like Desmond Ritter, and he was on the Millionaire Maker winning lineup. So we'll see. Maybe I'll gain some interest in this game as it goes, as the week goes on. I think Zay Jones coming back, maybe he takes away opportunities from the other guys. I think you can always play Evan Ingram at tight end. Like he's shaping up as one of the better receiving tight ends that you'd want to play this year in the NFL. The other pieces seem like a little bit too expensive for me, but it's I guess I'm primarily disinterested in the Pittsburgh side. Just they haven't done a whole lot this year. Deontay Johnson's coming back. We just don't know. Like it's kind of a split backfield. Maybe more interested in the Jacksonville side. Like you bring up a good point with Calvin Ridley that he's really cheap now. 5,800. I could see people going there. This is a game that I'm probably more likely to just have at like 5%, 6% in my 150 build, right? And then I might be like 3 times the field on it, right? If it's 2% owned, then I'm 6%. Then I'm 3 times the field on it. I agree that it might not have the biggest ceiling in the world. There's also like a little bit of a weather concern. I think it could rain during the game. Could be a little bit windy. I think it's like yellow on Kevin Roth's forecast, so not necessarily like devastating weather, but maybe like not the best environment.
And the ownership goes down even more. I'll be the only one with this thing. That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Right? I know what I'm doing. I take shots on these things, and if it works out, it works out. I'm not. If I'm building 12 lineups, I'm not putting this in like 6 of my lineups. I'm talking about like this is like I'll have Lawrence and I'll have Pickett and then I move on, right? But it's like it takes up 2 out of my 12 lineups or something like that, as opposed to like playing an overowned stack or anything like that. Like Stephen Smith in the chat says, if the Stroud in the Houston passing game gains ownership, is it okay to go with Pierce and the Thielen run back? I'm concerned about Pierce's touches with Singletary. Before you touch upon Pierce, I know you're a big Pierce supporter. I don't care about Stroud and the Houston passing game ownership. If there were 7 million% owned, that just means you have to play lower owned players in the rest of your lineup. So never concern yourself with like, oh, well, once if the ownership doubles, that means I just have to remove them completely from my player pool. It's like, no, and then you just have to build your lineups differently. The appeal to the Houston Carolina game, if it is lower owned, is that I could play cheaper pieces in this game and then just jam in Tyreek, jam in Pollard, Hill. I could jam in the chalk high projected run. That's the whole purpose of vomit stacks. Like it's not about the vomit stack. It's about the vomit stack, the vomit game goes off enough. It doesn't have to score 70 points, no. But it has to score enough that when you plug in Cooper Kupp and Kelsey or like all these other ceiling players in your lineup, like, oh, the only way you could do that is by playing the cheaper game stack that's kind of vomity. And that's the appeal to that. So, like, the ownership doesn't matter as much to me. It just means that, oh, I'm less inclined to also play Tyreek Hill in that type of lineup or as the ownership goes up. But it doesn't really take me away from the game. And I'm not going to just not have it at all just because, oh, well, he's twice as owned as I thought he was going to be. Oh, get rid of it.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that highly owned either because I just think there's lower implied point totals. Like the game total just isn't that high that I think it's going to draw a ton of ownership. Like CJ Stroud hasn't been that highly owned throughout the season. I think, that I don't see why that would like shoot up this week. I just think there's other places people are going to want to go to. And so I'm not that concerned with ownership this week on that game. But I think you said it right as well. Like you're maybe more concerned about the lineup than the individual ownership on the players to begin with.
Okay, last person I want to talk. Last team. I don't know what their ownership is going to be, but it may be way too low.
Yeah.
Cincinnati at San Francisco. Purdy's out. We're going to have Sam Darnold in. He's going to be 4,300 on DraftKings. The reason the 49ers are, as of right now, if I were to build in my spy lineup, it would be a Sam Darnold lineup. And it's not because of Sam Darnold being 4,300, although that helps. It's because Deebo Samuel is out.
Yeah.
Once Deebo Samuel comes out, it's like 40, like I could just play all these. I mean, I think you could capture the entire 49ers offense in your lineup and still play anyone else that you want. Like you play Darnold, McCaffrey, Ayuk, and Kittle. Like, who else gets the ball? I mean, like, who else it produces enough that you're even worth playing? It's very similar to we talk about the Raiders, right? Oh, the Raiders, it only goes through like 2 or 3 guys. And it's just, if they score a lot of points, we know who it goes to. The 49ers are that, but they're actually a good team. And I don't know what your thoughts on Brock Purdy is. I don't consider Sam Darnold to be that much of a downgrade to Brock. I don't think Brock Purdy's this great quarterback. Yeah, he's probably better than Darnold, but I don't think Darnold, I mean, the 49ers are going to go. They have a 24 implied team total on a slate where like half the teams are under 20. So like even the betting lines are saying like, oh yeah, maybe the 49ers don't have a 27 implied team total, but 24 is pretty good and you know where the ball is going.
Yeah, I put this as my favorite correlation on the slate because I think you could play Jamar Chase, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. Like you can play pieces from this game, and so I think Purdy practiced yesterday, but we haven't seen a guy go into the concussion protocol and play the same week. So we don't know what's going to happen. Like so Purdy could be I think the first guy to do that, but does seem like more likely like Sam Darnold's going to play, and I agree. Like we're like a year ago, what would we have thought of this discussion? Like we actually would have put Sam Darnold way ahead of Brock Purdy. And so like Darnold was like the second pick in the NFL draft. Like that was for a reason. Brock Purdy was like the last guy drafted. So I mean, I'm not like trying to dump on Purdy. I'm just saying like maybe Sam Darnold has some potential that we don't really know about. Like he could be good. He could also be bad. So we don't know. So there's a lot of different ways to play this game. Has like probably one of the bigger range of outcomes on the slate. Like I wouldn't be shocked to see San Francisco put up like 35 points. Like that's near their season average. And now they're starting the guy that was the second pick in the NFL draft like a few years ago versus the guy that was the last pick in the NFL draft. But maybe Sam Darnold is the same Sam Darnold that he looks like from Carolina and the Jets. And this is maybe creating some short fields for Cincinnati. So maybe like Joe Mixon's even in play, whereas we wouldn't normally play Mixon against like a San Francisco defense. The San Francisco defense is really good, but it also has, I think, the second most pass attempts against it in the NFL per game. So Jamar Chase is in play, maybe is getting a bunch of receptions and a touchdown. So this is a game that I think you can game stack, especially if like Sam Darnold is the quarterback for San Francisco. Like then he's way too cheap for being in such a good offense with a quarterback that has potential, but also has blow up potential. So yeah, you're creating a lineup right here, but I think you can do that. And then it doesn't leave you a ton of money, but yeah, it's an interesting game stack.
Right. But I mean, you could do something like the Patriots defense, the Cardinals defense. Like the Cardinals defense against Baltimore. I mean, it's a defense. You get 46. I mean, it's tight. But if you didn't want to play Chase or you didn't want to play Ayuk or didn't want to play, like if you take one of the more expensive pieces out of the game, I mean, like if you don't play Chase, right, you just play the entire 49ers offense. And then, I mean, you could play Mixon if you want. I mean,
yeah,
just to fill a running back spot as a run back there if you wanted to do that. And then you have kind of salary can kind of fit stuff in. Right, you could play a Breece Hall, you could play a Pacheco, you could play some. But I'm saying, but look at. I mean, if you just take a look at this, it's like this is the 49ers offense.
Yeah,
like Darnold, McCaffrey. Like you could play McCaffrey with Darnold. I mean, McCaffrey catches passes and Darnold's only 43. Like, how many points do you really need out of a $4,300 quarterback? But it's like you get all of this, and you know what ends up happening? Ray McLeod and Jawan Jennings touchdowns on 3 receptions, but But this is essentially the offense. So you're betting on the offense. That's why I said, like in single entry type of stuff, the smaller field contests, I'm much more likely to just over correlate and just go, just 49ers do well. And then, dude, I don't even need a run back. I don't even care about that. Then I could go to, instead of playing Chase in this lineup, what you do is you go over to our good friends, the team that never disappoints. Right? What's the team that never disappoints? Oh, Miami. There you go. There's Miami. Right? And you play Tyreek Hill in this lineup. Right? And now you get just as squeezed as you do with Chase. But I mean, you could play Pollard. You could play, look, if you want to bet on the Cowboys offense, you could play Pollard. And if you look at our sim labs when it comes out, a lot of times the sims want you to play multiple players from the same team, even if it's not like with their quarterback or anything like that. So you could play like Michael Gallup in this lineup also. And you're betting on the Cowboys and the 49ers. And then you play a defense and then you could fit stuff in. And I'm much more inclined, like the more and more, John, that I take a look at what simulations produce as far as like simulating the game out play by play and everything like that, that I'm more and more inclined to not care about run backs unless it just so happens to be a value that's worth playing there. Like it's not like something, it's literally something that I'm never forcing in like ever again. It's just, if it happens, it happens. And if it does, it does. But more, I downloaded CSV from the past 2 weeks and I noticed that a lot of top players, like 150 maxers, play a lot of those lineups with onslaughts, like one quarterback, three teammates, no run back, and then two guys from another team. And sometimes those two guys aren't a running back, and sometimes it's just a wide receiver and a tight end without the quarterback. It's like you're almost playing it as like almost like a hockey lineup. Like you just want you want like three guys from one team and three guys from another team. Don't worry about if the game turns into a shootout. You just want one team to put up a lot of points. If it just so happens that, like in baseball, like, yeah, you could game stack. Games do happen to be 12-10, but just because one team scores 12 points doesn't mean it's more likely the other team also scores a lot of points. So there's 13 games on a slate, like on Sunday, like just stack the two teams that are going to put up a lot of points, regardless if it's the same game or not.
Yeah, I think that's definitely viable. I mean, there's correlation, right, between quarterback and wide receiver, quarterback and tight end, and there's some also correlation between the players on one team and the players on the other, in terms of like pass attempts, stuff like that. And if one running back gets 2 touchdowns and that team's up, 14 points, and the other team maybe having to pass more, but there's also, that doesn't necessarily mean that just because there's a little bit of correlation across those teams that the 2 highest scoring teams of the week are going to be from the same game. So maybe you want to find that second team. So it is maybe like 2 on-slot lineups from different teams in the same lineup is the way to go. I think that's viable.
Right. I've been looking at the CSVs a little, looking at results DB, and then also counting the lineups that look like that comparison to what historically the optimal should show. So like the top 0.1% of lineups, and they're under-owned. It used to be that run backs were under-owned, and now they're a little bit more efficiently owned, and these onslaughts are now under-owned. And obviously, if you're playing a contest like the Millie Maker or the Play Action or the $1 Mini Max or something like that, like the efficient, not everything's under-owned, right? Because you get like 20-25% of the lineups are mishmash, someone banged their head against the keyboard type lineups that, you don't play those lineups, right? With no correlation, no semblance of project, lineups that are 42 points lower projected than they should be than compared to other lineups. Right. But if you're playing a little bit more competitively, the better players tend to be playing the more correlated lineups, more onslaughty type. They're not stuck with like, oh, I'm just going to go into lineup HQ. I'm going to do this. Quarterback, 2 wide receiver tight ends, 1 run back. You'll see lineups that, that they're playing 3, and that could include a running back, and it could include a running back that doesn't even like catch passes. Right? It's just that this team puts up 42 points, they win. Like that's like the most likely scenario. It's if this team, if the other team goes 3 and out, punt, interception, right? Like, look at what happened with the Ravens and Lions. Look at what happens with the Dolphins. Like, yeah, the other team gets the ball back and they have possession for 47 seconds, and then the Dolphins get the ball again. And then they score. The other team gets the ball for 1 minute and 16 seconds, and then the Dolphins get the ball back and they score again. So, like, that is just as correlated as Dolphins score, and then the other team comes back and scores, and then Dolphins score, and the other. It's the same amount of correlation. So don't always assume that, like, oh, I can't play Hurts and Brown. I can't play Lamar Jackson and Andrews without like an Arizona Cardinal in my lineup. Like, what if the Ravens just go into Arizona and just win 42-3? Like, you're going to want the Ravens and want no one on the Cardinals. Now, can you play Marquise Brown in that line? Yeah, sure. The point that I'm making, John, is that, like, if it naturally happens, if Trey McBride shows up in that lineup because he projects well, then so be it. Okay, he happens to be on the other side of the game, but it's not something that I would necessarily be going out of my way and going, yeah, I know this run back, right, from the other side projects poorly and is high owned, but I'm going to throw him in my lineup because the correlation doesn't make up for that. I think the main point is these correlations aren't like R of 1 and an R of 0. Like, these are like R of like 0.12. Like, it's there, but it's not very strong.
Yeah, exactly. And like, if you think about a guy like Trey McBride, like, what is he, like 2,800? Like, an extra couple of receptions maybe does push him to like being the value tight end you need, right? Like, let's say we're expecting him to get three receptions, but Baltimore's got a big lead, so Arizona's got to pass more. And a couple of receptions at 2,800 extra on top of what we're expecting, like, yeah, maybe that pushes him into like where the correlation's enough. But you still want to be playing like well projected lineups. So yeah, you don't want to be sacrificing so much projection for correlation that you've got a lineup that just doesn't project well. Like, when you like run these optimal lineups, like, you don't want to be giving 2 touchdowns. Like, you don't want your lineup to be giving like, spotting 2 touchdowns in terms of projection to like the most highly projected lineup. You want to be a little bit closer than that, even though you do want to build in some correlation if possible. And what you're saying, basically, in favor of like the onslaught type lineups. I mean, almost in fact, I think maybe every single team that's got an implied point total this week of 25 or more points is facing a team that has an implied point total of 20 or less, like Dallas, Baltimore, Kansas City, Miami. Like, they're all in these games. Like, it would not shock you if Miami, went crazy and they don't bring any pieces from New England. I mean, but you can play Kendrick Bourne if you want. He's cheap. Like, if I'm going to miss kind of on a correlation, I want to miss cheaply, if that makes sense. Like, with like a Kendrick Bourne or a Trey McBride on a guy that doesn't need a whole lot extra to get there, versus say like with Dallas, trying to like fit in like Tony Pollard and I got to go Cooper Kupp because I'm playing Tony Pollard and it's the same game. That might not get you there.
Well, a good way to be able to measure how much that correlation is worth versus ownership versus projection is by simulating it, right? I say in Theory of DFS, if you want to get my courses, theoryofdfs.com, I say methodologies go from blunt to precise, right? The bluntest is I'm just going to guess off the top of my head. The most precise is I'm going to have a time machine and see exactly what happens. Like, there's something in between there. And using lineup HQ and using a solver-based tool, right? It's a knapsack problem solver with restraints, and using some heuristics. That's what lineup HQ. I mean, that's what a lineup builder does. And you have to put in what you want, and then kind of finagle of like, well, is this lineup too high owned? Is this lineup not correlated enough? Like, you kind of have to eyeball a lot of this stuff. So it is a more precise methodology than just like pulling it out of your ass. It's not the most precise methodology. A more precise methodology is to simulate the slate out, 100,000 times, the contests themselves and the games and the contest, and see what lineups, show up at the top more often than not, cash rates and stuff like that. And that will be in our sim labs that will be coming out next week. So if you're using the RotoGrinders projections, our ownership projections and our player projections, you will be able. I will be shown, John. I've been fooling around with it. It's quite likely that on these shows, on RotoGrinders Today, I'll be showing sim labs for slates more than I show lineup HQ. Now, we don't have all the sports in. I mean, we have NFL for now. Stuff will be added over time, but we have the showdown stuff for NFL, the main slate stuff for NFL, and then they're going to be working on NBA, and then eventually adding NHL. Obviously, MLB will come back, right? So, looking through that, I mean, a lot of times I just say, let me take a look at this Pittsburgh-Jacksonville thing, right? You're like, oh, you're kind of skeptical. And I'm like, let me look at change some settings around, and it's not that hard. I go, let me look at upside, let me look at low-owned upside, and then let me put out 100 lineups. And I'm like, oh, 58 of them are from this game. It's like, oh, maybe I would have never thought of that. And like, that's a possibility. And then it's like, well, who do I build around those lineups? So it's like, oh, well, let me put in I could put in Kenny Pickett. I want the lineups to show Kenny Pickett and George Pickens. And then show me the top 20 simulated lineups that contain those two guys. And it'll show me the constructions that, based on our projections, would say score would rate the highest in the contest that you're playing. So you can kind of it's not just like, oh, these are the lineups to play. Like, it doesn't really work like that. It's more of like, test your theories out and compare lineups to one another. And if you want to play the Colts this week, we didn't talk about them at all, and just like, I'm all in on the Colts. It's like, well, you could use our tool to just like, okay, feel free, put in the Colts, but at least play the best lineups around them. So you don't have to judge for like, is this enough leverage? Is this enough correlation? Is this like that? It does it all for you in the tool.
Yeah. I've played around with it a little bit, and it is a very easy way to get good lineups. So I think it's like very slick. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a good thing.
Right. So that'll be coming out next week. I'm going to have Chris Jamino on Tuesday. We'll be doing an entire episode of like how SimLabs works. It doesn't work like a lot of the other stuff around the industry. It's a little bit simpler. It's meant for people that are RotoGrinders premium members, because why wouldn't you be, right? You get all of our content, right? John Squirrel Patrol will have the solo ship episode out later today with JM to Win. We got tons of more content on the channel, so subscribe today. Hit the link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. Hit us in the Discord, rotogrinders.com/Discord. Most of the channels are free, so come and join us there. And John, what else? You don't have no MMA this week, so did they put NBA on your plate just to add more stuff?
Yeah, basketball. So yeah, I've got a basketball article on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then just like expert survey, Latin HQ every day. But yeah, it's good to have basketball back. That's kind of the nightly thing I've been doing this week. Watching the basketball, but yeah, nothing. There'll be small basketball slates on Sunday for a reason, because that's the NFL's day. So.
Okay, well, you can get all of that behind our paywall, rotogrinders.com/premium. Join us. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. You know how much I like the thummy thumbs. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to always know when we go live. We got an NBA slate tonight. Got Grinders Live. We got Crunch Time. You got to get the RotoGrinders app on your phone. You'll always get the notifications of who's in, who's out. Right? It's the third day or whatever. It's still it's 700 people in the injury report. Who cares? Right? That's NBA for you. So you always have to stay up to date with stuff here at RotoGrinders when it comes to NBA. We got a little NHL slate I'm going to play. Yeah, there's like a 6-game NHL slate. There's some soccer tomorrow, college football. We got a college football show. We got all the content for CFB. I've been killing the college football props. So get in now. You got to get the props today. They're coming out today. Get the props, get the prop tool. I just use the projections. I just slam and spam the projections, and I just make money in college football props. Apparently, it's that easy. Just jam them in before the numbers move, and whatever. So join us. How much more selling can I do at the end of the show? I have no idea. Hit all the buttons, do all the things, and I'll see you back on Monday because I'm always here, 11 o'clock in the morning on weekdays, talking about all things you're thinking about in daily fantasy, props, and pick'em on RotoGrinders Today.